Hey guys, and welcome back to another episode. Today we're going to take a complete and comprehensive look at the SEGA Mega Man adventure that we never received here in the United States, Mega Man: The Wily Wars. Many people would say that these were the first two collections of Mega Man games, but imagine that the first actually came out all the way back in 1994, and the physical cartridge was only officially released over in Japan, and by 1995 it was also released in Europe and Australia. North America, on the other hand, was only exposed to the Wily Wars via the SEGA channel, a paid subscription service at the time. There's just a lot to be fascinated with, like the fact that Mega Man 1, 2, and 3 from the NES didn't just make it to 16-bit, but on SEGA of all places. The idea is just like the NES Mario Bros. Making it onto Super Nintendo with Mario All-Stars, and the Ninja Gaiden trilogy doing the exact same. The concept just screams, I should have been on the Super Nintendo along with all the others. But apparently, the Capcom and SEGA relationship was growing at the time, and here we have it, a Mega Man trilogy on the SEGA Genesis. Now of course, technically, it wasn't on the Genesis, it was on the Mega Drive, which sounds even better, Mega Man on the Mega Drive. How could it go wrong? And you must be wondering, where's Wily Wars 2 featuring the second trilogy? Apparently, the production for Wily Wars was outsourced and slow going, with numerous and major issues during the debugging process that were described as so bad and an absolute nightmare. And one member stated, I found myself saying, I can't believe we've made it out of here alive. So overall, with everything considered, we are lucky that this thing exists at all. Collectors that wanted to get their hands on an original English copy had to spend hundreds of dollars, although we are extremely fortunate that bootleg versions exist for the SEGA Genesis. Not only does this save hundreds of dollars, but you can make a strong argument that the game is better this way, due to the PAL consoles running at a slower speed, 50 compared to 60, and some quick math would indicate that the game would run a little over 80% of the speed that we are used to, which may not sound like a big deal, but it absolutely is and changes the entire experience. So playing Wily Wars on the Genesis at 60 is definitely the best way to go, unless you feel like slower in a game that isn't overwhelmingly fast is more enjoyable. The great thing about this compilation is that you can save your progress, which is a great feature. While Mega Man 2 and 3 had passwords, Mega Man 1 did not, so the fact that you can save your progress in 3 separate files is an amazing feature. Something that was also done by Mario All-Stars, but skipped by Ninja Gaiden Trilogy. Another nifty little cherry on top is that once you clear all 3 games, you unlock one last bonus game with a few levels and another final showdown. Plus you choose which of the weapons you unlocked from the previous games that you would like to use, which is awesome. After spending a couple days playing through these 6 Mega Man adventures and really taking a look and listening to these 2 side by side, plus the final challenge of Wily Tower, there is a lot to look at, listen to, and talk about. So let's take the very first, truly comprehensive, in-depth look at Mega Man: The Wily Wars. So the plot with Wily Wars is that Dr. Wily is using time travel to have you go through the first 3 adventures again, as you can see all of the Robot Masters appear on the screen. I definitely want the shot and jump button moved over to A and B, it just feels much better and tight than B and C. It's also a great call that they have a sound test in here, since there is so much music to listen to. The fact that you can pop this in and listen to the music is great. The only weird thing here is there's no cursor for the options, so it's just confusing on how to get out of this since you have to select exit. But either way, Mega Man 1. Upon starting it up right away, first thing to notice is that they made the character select screen more personalized like the other Mega Man games featuring mugshots instead of full body images. The music sounds cool and gets you pumped for the 16-bit Mega Man experience. As we all know, the music is a huge strength of the Mega Man series. It's full of headbangers that will spin in your brain, keeping you thinking about the game long after you put it down. So handling these with care was extremely important, and some of the tracks seem to benefit from enriched harmony and depth. I was already a fan of Bomb Man's theme, as I used it in the NES shelf video, but I actually love what they did with it here. It's amazing to take in, honestly. There are completely new backgrounds in a bunch of the levels, and they look great, like everything received a fresh coat of paint, and Mega Man himself has been redrawn, of course. As far as the gameplay goes, it's really good, but I would be lying to you if I didn't tell you about a couple of the things I noticed, such as the notable slowdown, like extremely noticeable. If I showed too many examples, it would make this game look like a complete broken piece of shit, but most of the game doesn't suffer from it, although we will absolutely see more extreme examples later. The AI of your enemies is an important thing to compare, and for the most part it's very similar, but there are actually some pretty noticeable differences that I experienced while alternating through beating one of them on the NES and then immediately playing through its port on the Genesis. One interesting quirk in all of the Mega Man games here is that the music never stops after you beat a boss, which isn't a big deal, but it is a difference. Let's check out Cutman next. As expected, things are looking fresh and nice, with clouds plus the sky actually looks like a sky, not like seafoam green. Some of the songs have certain aspects of them amplified or mellowed out just a little bit, and you can hear that here too. As you're playing the game and getting more of a feel for it, there's just a gigantic elephant in the room with Mega Man's control. You don't want it to be true, you might even shrug it off and say it's in your head, because a perfectly executed 16-bit Mega Man trilogy is all you want to see, but no, in addition to the substantial slowdown aspects of the game, the control has two aspects going on that differentiate it from the NES. One is the ever so slight delay for running left to right. There's just a small fraction of a second delay where he begins to run, and not many people talk about it, but it actually feels more like Mega Man 1 from NES, where there's the tiniest delay where you begin to run, and he controls like this throughout the entire game, not just Mega Man 1. But the thing I actually have a problem with is how they nerfed the rate of your fire for your buster in this game, and I absolutely hate that. You can still fire 3 on the screen at once, but believe me, the rate is heavily reduced, and sometimes while jumping and landing, it seems worse. Like I could be jumping and mashing the shot button like crazy, and somehow only 2 will come out most of the time, and I never ever have this problem with the originals. Nobody seems to talk about that at all, but it is so noticeable, it's not even funny. You can throw some weapons very quickly without a problem, but your buster is not the same beast that it once was. You've got to make the most with your shots in order to make these not drag on forever, although the slowdown sometimes makes sure of it. Alright, next let's check out Gutsman. The background looks much nicer with the addition of mountains in the distance. A couple gameplay differences I noticed was with the platforms right away. The timing is harder because the thing moves slower, so a section that many would already call challenging is a bit more frustrating due to how perfectly timed these jumps have to be in order to not start over. You definitely have more room for error in the original, and not only that, but you have to wait while scrolling 3 full lengths in the SEGA version since it takes a very long time for these things to line up. So the only way you're getting through this is to keep your eye on the track and hold jump at the very instant those pixels are about to overlap. There's no question that the rate of fire makes these hiker enemies more annoying than usual. It's really an interesting thing to get used to how the slowdown works in this game. It's kind of like slow-mo, where if you're shooting and jumping or using a certain weapon, you'll see everything crawl, like the explosions from your bomb to take down Gutsman. It definitely adds another element to a bunch of these fights. Elec Man's level has some cool additions to the background with added equipment and wires, which create some depth to the level, and they also did the same thing with some clouds in the sky. Another difference is that these guys scroll down onto the screen much faster than the NES, which is always a little weird combination with your slower rate of fire. A pretty cool part of the music here is the extra emphasis on what sounds like a gnarly Genesis guitar. As usual, it's a long climb to the top of the level, and it's definitely nice to use your recently acquired magnet beam to create some platforms over these assholes. They're already hard to take out by shooting in the NES one, so you don't want anything to do with the tank enemies like this here at all. After carefully climbing through some timed electrical gates, you reach Elec Man, and he has always been one of the crazier robot masters, with his sporadic movement and giant electrical attacks that wipe out 1/3 of your health. Using the cutter blade just evens out the playing field, and it's still not easy. Time to take out Iceman, him and his damn parka coat. So you can definitely see another nice background was added, with some mountains in the distance along with some nicer looking clouds. The backgrounds while underground also have more added depth and detail to them as well. The slippery ice feeling is still here, and the essentials of being able to moonwalk into items and through doors are still present. These block pattern sections almost play the same, but with one weird little aspect of them is that they take an extra moment when they cycle through from their last up to their first, which is really weird and it throws off timing. Then you have the section where you have to cross that huge gap by jumping from the tops of these guys or using your recently acquired exclusive Mega Man 1 Magnet Beam platform gun. Iceman is basically the same, just with more typical slowdown like you'd expect, which can make the timing of these things easier, but the speed returns to normal once in a while, making it much harder to get a rhythm for. Of course, Elec Man's attack kills him in only 3 shots, so that's definitely the easiest way out of this thing. Last robot master to take on is Fireman, and yet again we have some really nice additions in the background, completely bringing the environment to life with flowing magma, caverns, and even heat waves, which is a cool touch. They even have a more industrial looking background as you get further into the level. It looks nice and it's a big step up from a black screen. A couple of changes to the gameplay. There are a couple of weapons that completely bog you down while throwing, and this became more apparent to me when throwing the cutter blade while moving forward. For some reason you just stop moving as opposed to being much smoother in the NES version. Fireman is actually much more tame in this than the original. The fight used to feel like you had to keep shooting since you knew you were going to take damage, as fire can come in such a way that it is impossible to avoid while fighting him, whereas he seems to basically only shoot one at a time in the Genesis, and with some simple jumps coming and going, he actually feels like he might be the easiest of the 6 fights. As far as the Wily stages go, it's a bit more of the same, with improvements that we've seen with better looking skies, touched up backgrounds, and constantly being reminded to play cleaner in order to compensate for your slower rate of fire. Using the ice shot is more important than ever to get by these hard-hitting tank Cyclops. Man, they put 4 of them in front of you when you only need 3 hits to kill you, and since you can't really gun them down, and running underneath isn't very easy to do, since their jump heights are random, this is a really important option to use. And you'll definitely want to use that again in the next section to make these jumps way easier. Jumps with the ceiling right over your head are not easy. After making it through some sections with just some enemies and spikes that aren't too bad, where things get real again though is when they repeat the hardest stage section in any of the levels, but also with spikes above you, so you definitely want to play it as tight and safe as you can while using your magnet beam. The next section is notorious for stumping gamers everywhere because it literally requires you to use this ability, and it's a very easy weapon to miss, since it's just randomly located on Elec Man's stage behind some blocks that you would use Gutsman's ability for, which of course is only an option if you've already happened to beat Gutsman before coming here. True story, that's honestly what happened to me when I actually played these games for my first time on the Anniversary Collections back in the mid-2000s. Back then, it took me days to get here. I wasn't sure of the order, and was definitely experiencing one of the steeper mountains of NES hard, so getting all the way to this part and just getting stumped and knowing I had to move on to the next game was a huge bummer. When I actually did get online to see what to do weeks after the fact, I was completely mauled by the Yellow Devil. I mean, look at how fast these things come into the screen. You have to jump so tightly through all of these to get through. Not to mention, even with its weakness of electricity, you're still trading the same amount of damage with him, meaning the absolute worst you can do in a winning situation is walk in there with full health, get through 6 of these with only 1 mistake each, and a 7th with none at all. Yes, 7 cycles of this, and that's assuming you don't miss a shot or make a silly mistake. In Wily Wars, they definitely chose to slow this down to make it less challenging, but on top of that, there is a consistently insane slowdown that makes this fight take over 3 minutes. Dead serious, that's actually how long the entire first part of the level was. The next section plays about the same as what we're used to, more clouds and these annoying guys. They rematch you with Cutman and it goes as expected, but I actually feel like Elec Man in this level is just harder to fight because using his weakness makes you stop, as we saw earlier. So you're harder to control, and the slight bits of slowdown when he attacks is just jarring and hard to deal with. You can only use one of these at a time, so you kind of just have to throw it out there and try to avoid what you can, hoping for the best. And after moving down only a few rooms, you come face to face with this level's boss, a fight against yourself. But your shots only do 1 peg of damage to him while he does 4 to you. God, so the copy is straight up 4 times stronger than Mega Man. The AI in the fights are pretty similar, where shooting immediately prompts them to jump, but just a couple of slight changes made a huge difference. The NES version has a couple of points on the ground where once he's there, he briefly stops to shoot. He only jumps and shoots if you shoot at him, so shooting a few out there high and low while not landing on one of his shots is the way to get through this. But in the Genesis, he shoots at ground level while immediately jumping at the same time. His jump can be toward you or away from you, at random. So sometimes he just shoots one low and jumps into you, and there's nothing you can do about it. Aside from that, your shooting gets really annoying at this point because as you try the same strategy of mashing the shot button during a jump, only 1 or 2 seem to come out most of the time. So it's very hard to keep him at bay when it feels like your damn buster doesn't work. So you'll find yourself getting cornered, trying to hit him 4 times more than he hits you. It's just a lot to put up with, and a really promising start to the fight doesn't mean anything. It does anything but guarantee you victory, as the game's much cheaper boss and completely nerfed firepower, a formula for madness, can easily result in a ton of bogus fights slipping through your fingers. The third Wily stage looks pretty similar overall, with little details in the background such as lines better spaced apart to give you a real sense of depth that make it much more obvious that you're in some kind of tubing, along with little squares and speakers, not sure. They also added what seems like little glowing electronics or fluid of some kind, which is a cool little touch that brings the stage more to life. The part where water washes past you and becomes a push at your back actually sounds like water, so it's more obvious what's going on here. And for yet another time, the rate of fire completely changes the boss fight. It looks way different than on the NES, where you can actually quickly rifle out shots, and this one's more like you just have to take some damage, since it takes 10 shots to get through each bubble. Although it doesn't necessarily make the boss incredibly hard or anything, it's definitely harder than the NES because of this, but as long as you're shooting at it while you can, the only way you won't win is if you get caught with a handful of those projectiles. And they're not too bad to avoid. For simplicity, of course you can always switch to Gutsman to throw these blocks if you ever get in too much trouble. It just goes from being fun and rewarding for you if you can shoot fast shots, to being a bit stubborn and annoying. Alright, here we are on the last level of the game. There are a lot of run-ins with trouble here. Since we were able to fight Cutman and Elec Man earlier, the other four are waiting for us here. The level itself is short and nothing crazy that you haven't already done before. There's some added detail to replace the once black screens with another metallic interior. There are some hallways of guns, but it's okay to take some damage once in a while. You might as well run past it. It's not really that big of a deal, but it's definitely easier to avoid the shots in the Genesis, since you're not really able to simply jump up and pound out a few, like you're able to in the NES. Once moving on from the spikes and platform easily with your magnet beam, we run into our first fight we have against Bomb Man, and using the fire shots makes the fight even easier than before. And after going against this guy a couple times, I think he's actually just a bit trickier to avoid in the Genesis. It just seems like he gives you less space, and he's harder to move around than before. But either way, he's not that big of a deal. Fireman is a breeze with Iceman's attack, and if you're not playing too sloppy, he should be over quickly. There's a slight difference in the beginning of the Iceman fight, since it's possible to get a quick shot in the NES, but the timing is slightly different here, so you can't in the Genesis. But either way, just using the slowdown to help space out your jumps with a few Elec Man attacks, and it's over with. The final of the Robot Master rematches is against Gutsman, without the help of a ledge to help you jump over his boulders, so you definitely want to toss your bombs in the right spots the best you can in order to get through this to the next checkpoint, right before the final showdown with Dr. Wily himself. The final fights are a bit different. For starters, they actually changed the weaknesses. You can't effectively use the cutter like you used to, but after a little trial and error and guessing, you can see that fire or electricity is the weakness. But even if you did run out of ammo or didn't use these, it actually goes down pretty decently with the Buster. There are two forms and the fights are pretty much the same, with just little bits of slowdown depending on the weapon you're using or when you're jumping. But overall, as long as you're jumping up to shoot and not getting hit by every other thing, it's not too bad of a fight, especially compared to some of the moments we've already been through. After defeating Dr. Wily, I made sure to record through the credits just to see if there's anything super different, and for the most part, things just got touched up nicely, and they actually gave Dr. Light some hair, making him updated and more accurate to his current depiction. The very last difference I noticed in Mega Man 1 was that they actually changed your outfit around. They didn't totally ditch the pink, but for some reason, now you've got pink arms instead of the pink shirt and pink tall socks. Okay. Alright, sweet. So that's Mega Man 1 for the Nintendo and of course on the Genesis. Definitely very interesting to play, compare and contrast those games, and I can't wait to do it for number 2 and 3, and of course you can't forget about the Wily Tower, the final challenge. So if you've made it this far, please support the channel just by liking and commenting, maybe subscribing if you enjoyed it, and I hope to see you next time. Thanks so much and have a great rest of your day.